This is the Kaiser Baas X450. It was released between the middle and the end of last year. It has a range of features and modes including slow motion, time-lapse, 4K video, stabilized footage, dashcam mode, burst photo, you name it, it's got it, 14 megapixels. So it films in 4K Ultra HD. We're going to go through the settings, the different modes, and we're going to look at some examples, and then we're going to gloss over some of the modes I don't really use that much, but I'll give you an insight. And then we're going to talk about the stabilization, what's good about it, what's not, what you can expect if you're going to buy this camera, and battery life, all that good stuff. So we'll just go over that, and then yeah, stay safe out there, coronavirus going around. So it does have quite a robust outer case without the waterproof casing on there. I wouldn't recommend using the waterproof casing because it really does degrade the quality of the image and the audio. So I suggest you keep it like this. The SD card slot and the ports are open to the environment, so you can't do much about that unless you tape them up. So that is a downside. The battery clip is strong. It won't come off without you actually forcing it, which is good. And it's easy to get out, but it can be a bit tricky to get in. Buttons are easy to use. Not that you really need to use them because there's a touch screen. It's well made. I've had it for 5 months now. Hasn't had any cracks or damages on it. It's a great little camera, and especially for the price. I recommend getting a gimbal for it if you're doing extreme sports because the stabilization isn't as refined as GoPros. So we're just going to go through the different menus on the Kaiser Baas real quick. So you've got your different options here. You've got video, time-lapse, and dashcam. So if you go into video, you go to your settings bottom right. So in the video settings, you have a few options. You can change the resolution all the way down to 720 from 4K. You can shoot at 1440p, 60 frames a second. Personally, I just keep it at 4K. With the field of view, you can set to wide, medium, or narrow. Just a point, when you set it to wide, you can't have the gyro stabilization on. So once you turn that on, that automatically goes back to medium. The lens distortion correction, so when you turn that on, it tries to correct the fisheye lens effect. It does a pretty good job, and that's pretty much it for your video settings. You can change the white balance and the exposure and all that. Oh, and we have a screen rotation selection here, which means if you got a dash cam in the car and you need to flip the screen, that's pretty useful. I use that. Time-lapse mode, so you can just set the time-lapse video mode and you can change the time-lapse intervals here. The other modes I'm not too familiar with, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You got the self-timer, time-lapse photo modes. You can do HDR shots, WDR shots. You can set the ISO and all that stuff. Pretty straightforward. So in the dashcam mode, you have the option to do a loop interval. It'll make them segment videos, and then once the memory card's full, it'll overwrite the oldest video. So it's pretty much like a normal dashcam. So this is the dashcam in action. And this cop car coming up, you can see his license plate quite clearly. This is with gyro stabilization on. Cows. Gyro stabilization off. The main thing about the gyro stabilization is if you are going to use it for anything that's more than moderate, you know, exercise or sports or whatever you're doing, I suggest you get a gimbal, which is usually the option anyway. If you can't afford to get a GoPro, and that's one of the reasons I got it as well, because I just didn't want to splash out $500 or $600 for a GoPro, and I wanted to have all the advantages of an action camera. And I really think that this definitely does the job. So this is the audio quality of the Kaiser Baas with the case off. Testing 1 2, testing 1 2. The best features about this camera are the time-lapse mode, which is just absolutely great. You just set it up on the ground. This is the setup I use for my time-lapses. Just have this little stand, and it can also be connected to a tripod, so it's real handy, It does the job. That's one of the best features of this camera, is the time-lapse. So if you want to get good landscape time-lapses, it's got a nice wide angle so you can see everything for a landscape shot anyway. And it's just a great B-roll camera, in case anything goes wrong with the main camera. And yeah, obviously the dash cam, one of the best modes as well. I would definitely recommend getting this as a dash cam. And also the 4K video quality is actually quite good when it's not been moved around frantically. So yeah, that is pretty much the review. Thanks for watching.